thank you so much for joining us. You're very welcome today. It's great to see so many people, up to 300, I think now. So I'll be around for the question and answer session later on with Kate and a couple more colleagues. And also there'll be a little chance for some questions at the end of my presentation here. So I'm going to fly through this really, and a lot of the information that I'm showing you today is taken from this HPAT information test taker booklet, which is down here on the right hand side once you go to the HPAT Ireland acer.org register button. Okay, so if you just go ACER on Google, you'll get into HPAT Ireland pretty easily. If you head into the register button on the ACER website, this page is what you'll see. And down on the right hand side, you'll find this extremely useful booklet, which you must read. It's a fairly comprehensive information booklet, which goes through absolutely everything you'll need to know. I'm going to touch on some points today that, considering there's 300 of you in the audience, I imagine a lot of you are in 6th year and are already well familiar with HPAT and what it is and how it works. And you've possibly been practicing away on the practice test workbooks for a number of months, if not years, because in many instances, people have taken to kind of looking at these tests, practice test workbooks that are available since transition year. But don't panic and don't worry if you haven't looked at it yet. There's still enough time for you to maybe put in an hour or two a week up until February of the test. And if you're in 5th year, you're well positioned now to get really prepared and get your hands on the practice test workbooks that you can work your way through at your leisure. So the main points that I'm going to touch on today are how to prepare yourself for the test in advance, what to do on the day, and making sure that you have all the technical requirements that are needed for you to set up and have a good test day. So when I show you these slides, you'll see that everything is taken from, I don't know why that's being scribbled on. Kate, can you see that? I'm not sure if that was me or somebody else. Anyway, the test will be online. So in previous years, pre-COVID, it was done in person. Now it's done online, and you will be proctored. So that means that someone will be with you on the test day to make sure that everything is going appropriately. And I'm going to work through some of that detail in some of my slides, as you see. So there are two really important booklets you get your hands on. The test taker information booklet on the left there, and on the right, the undergraduate entry to medicine for EU applicants. So if anybody's here in the room today watching, and if you're international or you're not EU, HPAT does not apply to you. So HPAT is only for EU students applying through the CAO. That's very important to get across today. So if you're an international student, you do not need to do HPAT. So the timelines, essentially, if you're taking the test in February and you're in 6th year, I imagine you're well versed in what needs to happen next. But essentially, the test is over 4 days in February. There's a bit of a window to allow for any people who have technical difficulties, maybe on the day, that are verifiable. And so we have a few more days after the 21st of February to allow people to come back in and retest if things go awry. So my purpose today is to ensure that nothing goes awry for you. So you do all this preparation in advance, and that we look at how you go about preparing the best you can for the test. So I'm going to focus on these kind of sections that I've taken from the information test booklet. Obviously, you guys can go back and reread this yourselves. We'll also make this presentation available to you at some stage throughout the day. It'll go somewhere on the site. You can download it, or maybe we email it to you. So essentially, the test window is from the 18th of February to the 26th of February. However, the 4-day tests really that you will be selecting to sit will be over the 19th to the 31st. It's really important that you get your application in as early as you can, You'll be aware that the CAO opens on November 1st, usually, and in order to take the HPAT, you must have a CAO number. So they kind of work in tandem. The earlier you get your CAO application in, and when I say get your CAO application in, all I mean is you put in your name, your address, and your personal details. And that will just facilitate your ability to apply for the HPAT test. You don't need to put any course choices in when you make your CAO application. You can put in anything you want, and you have until July 1st to change your mind. So it's not important, to think about the course choices right now when you're making your application for HPAT. All you need to do is make sure you have the CAO ID number. So in order to do that, you go onto the CAO site, you get your CAO ID, and then you go onto the ACER site, and with your CAO number, you apply for the HPAT test. So there's a significant number of technical checks that you need to carry out to ensure that on the day that you do your test, everything goes well for you. It can be a very stressful environment, obviously, sitting a high stakes test like this. So everything that you can do in advance of February will really help you to make sure that your test taking day goes well. It's going to be significantly long as well. So you need to be well prepared in advance. You need to kind of get up early or get there early. To your desk, to your workstation, to a place where you're comfortable, where you have the right equipment. And I'm going to go through what the right equipment is. So realistically, you will need to be using a fairly good laptop with a large screen. The larger, the better, because a lot of the stuff that you'll be looking at on screen, it's much, much easier if you have a larger desktop monitor. A laptop is fine. If you can hook it up to a monitor, brilliant. If you can't, no worries, but you just need to have a very good look through the demo, the online demos, so as you're familiar with what things look like and where to go with them. So when we talk about an MCQ, multiple choice questions, the HPAT test is an MCQ. And this is what it used to look like when it was in paper form. And it was probably more difficult to do it in paper form because you ran the risk of filling in the wrong line, or maybe coming back to something and filling things in the wrong sequence. So now what we have are radio buttons. So this is taken from the demo of the HPAT online test. So this is really to familiarize yourself with how the test works, okay? So you'll see that this is a question from the demo. It goes through all the scenarios, and then on the right-hand side, you have to select one of the radio buttons for the correct answer. So you'll see that the bigger the screen, the easier it is to look at, okay? It's not so bad for section 1 and 2, but when it comes in really handy is when you go to section 3, when you're trying to work out these sequencings and the missing segments. So the larger the screen, I think, on your eye, the better for you. So if you can start to kind of get familiar with what you need now, I would say to you, that's going to be time well spent over the next couple of weeks. So you need to make sure that your laptop is configured correctly and it doesn't have any spyware on it or any kind of applications that will raise red flags. So you need to run the tests that Acer provide for you to make sure that the device that you use on the day of the test is fit for purpose, okay? So all of this detail, as I said, it's kind of long, but it's really important you get it and that you understand it and that you have tested it. This is what the demo piece looks like when you go in and you've set up your HPAT account. So the HPAT account that you set up will allow you access to the demo. You can do the demo as many times as you like. Just be careful when you do go into the demo that you choose view sections 1, 2, and 3. This section on the right here, which says view written English demo, that's only for University of Limerick applicants. It's not for students who are applying for medicine in the 5 universities. Okay, so just ignore that section. That's why I put an X through it, and don't be confused by it. There is no written section for the HPAT. You just have section 1, 2, and 3. So you can cruise through those demos, and really more importantly, you need to get your hands on these. So these are the practice test workbooks. Okay. What's really great about making your application to ACER is that you will be provided with a full test, a full set of worked answers, and you'll be able to download that yourself onto your machine. You can print it off if you wish, and you can work away on each of the sections. And the thing about HPAT is, you know, if you did a test one week and you did a second one the following week and a third one the following week, if you went back to the first one, you really wouldn't remember what the answers are. So you can repeat the tests and you can get better at them. You can become more familiar and you can work on your speed. So those practice test workbooks are available on the ACER website, and I wouldn't recommend going anywhere else for the time being until you've worked your way through those practice test workbooks. On the day of taking the test, you will be asked to go through a couple of different functions. You must have ID, and it must be photographic ID, like a passport. So it's really important that you're able to show who you are. So on the bottom left here, you'll see that you're able to submit any of these documents. So if you don't have one of those documents, I'd really recommend you try and get one of those before February. And given the times we're in, that can take a little bit of time. So if you don't have a passport already, well, no time like the present to go and apply for one online, get it sorted out. And at least on the day of your test, you'll have something that's valid to use for the online proctor to view. So that's really, really important, okay? And then on the right-hand side, I've kind of highlighted what you can't use as ID. All right, so be very careful about that, okay? Moving on to the next slide. There's a ton of things that aren't permitted. Basically, the only thing you can bring into the test are 2 pieces of paper, pencils, pens for your scratch work. You'll be asked at the end of your test to rip up those 2 sheets of paper as well and get rid of them. So the online proctor will want to see who's in the room with you. So nobody should be in the room with you. There should be no mobile phone, or if you have a mobile phone, they'll ask you to put it away out of arm's reach. You can't have a Fitbit on, you can't have any of those things on the left-hand side, essentially. So just to make sure you're well prepared on the day and you know these things in advance. That's why I'm kind of putting them up there in black and white for you to see. The piece here that's really, really important to note is that when they're doing the checks, when you sit down to take your test in February, it can take anywhere between 10 minutes and half an hour to make sure that you're ready to go. So the proctor, the online proctor, will book to you and will ask you to show, you know, the room. That's why they ask for a mirror, so they can show the mirror who's behind the screen, to make sure nobody's behind the screen helping you during the test. If things with your connectivity are a bit dodgy on the day, you know, the prep for taking the test can take a bit longer. So just make sure that you have, you know, water and you have been kind of prepared in advance for what essentially maybe 3 hours sitting down. So make sure you've had a nice breakfast, porridge or muesli or something that's going to keep you going and sustain you and not make you too giddy or anxious on the day. So if you need to take a bathroom break, you can. However, there is no time allocated to that. So you're eating into your exam time if you go to the loo. Of course, you may go to the toilet if you need to, but you just need to tell the proctor, I'm going to the toilet. The clock won't be stopped. So you need to rush off and rush back. So the least amount of time you need to do that, the better. Obviously, students with disabilities or who need reasonable adjustments, you need to make contact with HPAT ACER yourself and reasonable accommodation will be put into place for you. So make sure that you have listed any of the disabilities that you have, and that may require some additional time on the day. So moving on to the next slide, I'm going to fly through this because I pretty much told you that. These practice test workbooks essentially will give you a really good feel for section 1, 2, and 3. Remember that section 3 is only worth 20%, okay? It is the section that you can practice a lot, and it is the section that you can get lots of things online through Google. If you Google nonverbal reasoning, you'll find tons and tons of tests online, but remember that it's only worth 20%. Section 1 and 2 are really the meaty sections, and these are the ones that you're going to have to get used to. The problem is timing, okay? So you've got 44 questions in 65 minutes in section 1. You've got 36 questions in section 2 that you must answer in 45 minutes. And then in section 3, you have 30 questions in 40 minutes. So essentially you have a minute, maybe a minute and 10, a minute and 20 seconds to read, understand, and go through the questions and answers and decide, well, which is the best, most appropriate answer here. I've given you some notes on the right on what the different kinds of logical reasoning and problem solving are. So within the HPAT test, you get quite a bit of this. So section 1 is really kind of graphs and tables, and we saw that in the demo that I showed you earlier on. So you're trying to establish patterns, you're trying to follow instructions, you're creating a process. Timing is critical. You need to read, absorb, and answer, and move on. So read, absorb, answer, move on. There's no negative marking in HPAT. So whatever answer you give is a good answer, better than no answer, because you may get it right if you guess. And if you have time at the very end, you may go back over and have a look at what you've done. But we recommend you essentially just give it one go, look at the question, review it, understand it, comprehend it, review the questions, and then answer and move on. Section 2, 36 questions, 45 minutes. Again, very fast. It's looking at different patient, doctor, student, child monologues, passages from books. It's kind of measuring empathy, emotional intelligence, good judgment, and if you can go with, really what's in your gut. So if you've read a lot and you're up to speed on, global issues and things that are going on in the world, and you've made decisions in your own mind as to what would be the most appropriate response given the profession that you're planning to go into. So it kind of covers that big list of skills. Section 3 is only worth 20%, but it's the one that people seem to spend a lot of time on. And that's fine, because I've just stuck in a screenshot of Google there. You can get tons and tons and tons of these. I wouldn't spend, more time on this than the other sections. While you mightn't be as good as other people at this section because our brains are wired slightly differently. So for you and me, for example, if I was taking this test, I wouldn't do so well in this section because my brain isn't wired in the way that I can very quickly recognize the sequence and the patterns and the missing sections. So while I might get kind of a little bit anxious about not being able to do it so well, I might spend too much time on this section to the detriment of section 2 and section 1, which really are the big meaty sections and are worth 40% each. So please make sure that you're spending appropriate and adequate time on all sections. And how do you do that? From these test workbooks, okay? And what's brilliant about the practice test workbook that you get when you register for the HPAT is that I'm going to show you an example of that practice test workbook. This is a missing segment question. It's quite a complicated one. Now, some of them are way, way easier. And then some of them are like this, which is kind of tricky. If your screen isn't big enough, you mightn't even see that the flower has stripes and spots and is solid in some spaces. But there is a logical pattern here, and they're trying, what you have to do is kind of remove the pieces A, B, C, D, E and figure out which one it isn't. So that's almost kind of a way of training yourself. Well, I know it's not A, okay? Logically, that doesn't fit. I know it's not B, that doesn't fit. And you're selecting whichever one you think is the correct answer. So if you got the answer E, you are right. And what is brilliant about this practice test workbook is that it goes through and you'll see the amount of information they give you there on why E is the answer. So if you imagine they've done this for every section, for section 1, 2, and 3. So if you were to sit down on Saturday morning, or whenever you have spare 3 hours or 2.5 hours in the next coming days, or this evening, imagine you sign up for your HPAT test, or you get your practice test workbook. You can get the practice test workbook without having an account, by the way. You need an ACER account, but you don't need to sit HPAT to get the practice test workbooks. So anybody can get the practice test workbook. So if you were to sit down and do the test, you'd be talking about, 2.5 hours to do the test with an alarm clock or a timer there beside you, and then take a break, come back, correct it. It's going to take about 20 minutes to correct, and then, leave it alone and maybe come back to it in an hour or the following day and go through section by section why each answer is the answer. All in, it's going to take you 6 hours to complete an entire test from start to finish, to looking at why each of the answers are the right answers. So you really have a ton of time now, if you're in 5th year, to really get familiar with this. And if you're in 6th year and you haven't yet got your hands on all of these practice test workbooks, that is the only thing I would say to you today to take away with you. I'm just going to give you a quick look at another one, which is much easier than the flower one. And the answer to that one is B. So if you got B, that's great. And it's slightly easier than the other one, you'll see. So the last things I'll say to you are, on the CAO website, you'll find a section on entry to medicine, which is over here on the left. And this is where you will get a ton of information and good tips on everything you need to know about applying through the CAO. I've highlighted this one on the right, CAO course choices, do's and don'ts, because I think this is a great one for everyone to remember. So what to do when you're making your CAO application, have a good read through those things, the do's and the don'ts. And my last point to you today would be, it's not all about August 2022 if you're doing your Leaving Cert this year. There are plenty of ways of getting into medicine. If it doesn't work out for you in August 2022, you can come back the following year. You could repeat HPAT, or you could decide I'm going to do an undergrad degree and come back as a graduate entry. Because the number of places obviously available is very low, but in graduate entry we have 220 places available. So that's a backup option, and certainly in your CAO choices you should be listing, some kind of science program as a plan B or an insurance policy to help you get here maybe later on.